Is Vancouver in a housing bubble? It's a question I ask many of my friends and people I meet in the city. But it's also a question I've been asking for over 5 years now. And despite the majority of people saying yes over those 5 years, we have yet to see the kind of correction usually associated with housing bubbles when they burst. So that leaves us in one of two places. Either we have yet to reach the peak or the limit of the bubble, or housing prices in Vancouver still have room to grow. I think it's time we face the music and realize we are at the former. I'm going to pull up a graph now showing the average sales price of detached and attached condos and townhouses in Vancouver for the last 40 years. You can see clearly the price of a detached home has skyrocketed, certainly in the last 15 years since the early 2000s, but in particular the last 18 months there was insane price growth that prompted the BC government to bring in a 15% foreign buyers tax to try to cool the market. And I think it did because you can see that little dip right there at the end this year. This was of course because of the tremendous pressure on our real estate market that has in part come from foreign buyers, but also wealthy investor immigrants, once allowed in under a now defunct federal program or under the Quebec Investor Immigrant Program that is still operational. And on the supply side, our municipal governments have been slow to react and reluctant to engage in meaningful rezoning that would allow for older, affordable housing to be saved and new housing to be built on previously unused land. So that brings us to today, where we have an average sales price of $1.6 million for a detached home, and that is just crazy, isn't it? I mean, it's driving people, especially young families, far, far out to the Fraser Valley, sometimes over an hour outside of Vancouver to places like Chilliwack and Mission, BC. But back to the original question, are we in a housing bubble? Well, I found another interesting graph the other day from Dr. Jean-Paul Rodrigue of Hofstra University. It's called The Anatomy of a Typical Bubble. Take a look at that. It shows all the different stages of a bubble before the price returns to the mean. But now take a look what happens when I put that graph side by side with the other graph showing the average sales price of a home in Vancouver. And oh boy, if that isn't something that is awfully scary, then I'm not sure what is. Just look at that. It's uncanny how many parallels the detached home price line in blue there has with the typical bubble graph. I'd even say we're somewhere currently between the bull trap and return to normal bump at the peak of the bubble. The only question now is how long will this return to normal phase last, and will it bring more eventual pain? I've mentioned before that while BC's economy is the strongest in Canada based on economic growth, much of that is based on the construction and in particular the residential construction industry. So a significant decline or bursting of the bubble into that capitulation phase would sink the local Vancouver economy completely and likely drag down the rest of the province with it. And with an election only 5 months away in BC, that is the last thing the governing BC Liberals want to see happen, as it would almost certainly cause them to be defeated. So last week, Premier Christy Clark announced her government's plans to double down and grow the bubble some more, while apparently learning nothing from the most recent housing bubble that popped in the US between 2006 and 2008 due to the subprime mortgage crisis. So late last week, the BC government announced this new program that would allow first-time homebuyers struggling to put together a down payment to get an interest-free or subprime loan that would match whatever down payment is made up to $37,500 or 5% of a $750,000 property. While this program is certainly not as crazy as the kind of policies we saw down south over a decade ago, this is awfully suspect, and I wonder if there is a major price correction. What will happen? Will we have a ton of defaulted mortgages the taxpayer is now partially on the hook for? It seems like it. And will this do anything to help the average Vancouverites struggling to enter the real estate market for the first time? Sure, but at what peril? The peril of expanding the Vancouver housing bubble just a few more months to ensure an election win while making the inevitable correction that much more painful? Well, I hate to say it, but it's seeming more and more likely. For the Rebel.media, I'm Christopher Wilson. Thanks for watching, and Merry Christmas to you and yours. And if you are one of the people that contributed to thebigplan.ca, I want to thank you personally. But we have one more stretch goal. We want to put together 4 kits for 4 new reporters out in 4 new locations to help expand our coverage in 2017. Go to thebigplan.ca and see how you can contribute to the expansion of the Rebel around the world.